So I'd love to share a poem with you guys. Men don't cry, or so we are told. It is not manly, it is not bold. Tears are a sign of weakness, we are told. So we bottle it up and it grows old. We are taught to be strong, to be brave, to never show fear, to never be grave. But what if I told you it is okay to cry? It is okay to feel, it is okay to sigh. Emotions are human, they make us who we are. Suppressing them only takes us so far. It is okay to be vulnerable, to show your pain. It doesn't make you weak, it makes you humane. So we hear all of this, but how is this truly received by the people around us?
In this episode, we're joined by Yemi, who's a software developer all the way from Nigeria, living in Edmonton. He also gives us an insight on how he has overcome his mental health and also has helped the people around him understand how he communicates and how he deals with vulnerability and coping mechanisms. Enjoy.
I find it very interesting that when, as men, we are kind of like subjected to a certain kind of emotions. So one of the most acceptable emotions for men is either anger or happy. And I was wondering if you could share more or delve deeper into that as to why we seem to always choose those two emotions and really afraid to express any other form of emotion.
Right. You're right. There's no time. It's almost like people don't spend time explaining to men that, hey, there's this whole spectrum between happy and angry, right? And like I was saying with the imposter syndrome, women get trained to be women, for better or worse. They get told, the different things, different topics. But men, you're basically told you're a hunter-gatherer, right? This is the way we've always done things, right? Your responsibility is to either protect or to provide, right? And so if you're protecting, usually you're angry. If you're providing, everyone's like, okay, we're happy you provided, so then you're happy. So your smile comes out when everyone is satisfied. You've taken care of anyone. That's when you're allowed to smile. You're a good father. You're a good older brother. Why are you happy if, why are you just happy because you haven't served anyone yet? That's the idea men have grown up with, right? Because for the sake of society or whatever, we've said these are your options. And then the angry part is, okay, stand up, rise up, protect your family, be strong, make sure that you're actually, everyone's safe, that sort of thing. So between those two things, I think we've lost the plot in making sure that men actually know that there's a whole spectrum of things between happy and angry. There's excited, there's melancholy, there's sanguine, there's all these, there's introspective. If a man is quiet and he's thinking, right? People are stunned. Why are you quiet? Like, what are you thinking about? It's like, I'm doing the same thing you do, right? But then people don't see it that way. So it's like, it shouldn't be that binary, but unfortunately, I think that's where that's come from.
Do you have a story particularly in a point in time where you tried to be vulnerable and you were met back, society met you back with not the proper response to vulnerability?
I mean, all the time. There's a particular situation that happened to me and demanded something of me, and I didn't want to do it for my own personal reasons. And I can be stubborn like that. That's the first time I'm saying that. My wife is going wow at home right now. But I, rather than just going, I'm a guy, I'm not going to do this, no. I decided that I love these people. I think they deserve my respect. So I wrote them a very long letter. I don't know how many guys actually do that. So I sat down and write, and I like to write, so maybe this is my thing. But I wrote them a very long letter explaining, hey, I love you. These are the decisions I'm taking regarding this group of people, such and such. It was a widespread decision, so it wasn't just myself that was affected. This group of people, these things are going to happen. This is why I'm doing it. This is why I understand what you're saying. So I was very vulnerable. I was like, let me, they love me, I love them. Let me actually be very clear. And they read it and went, okay. I was like, oh, okay.
Okay.
The summary of the response was, thank you for, writing all this. Like, wow, we didn't know you were a writer like that, but okay, right? And I understood that, so it wasn't like acknowledging any of the things I said. And sometimes you need to understand, if you see this letter, it's It's me pouring myself out. Like, I'm going to be vulnerable. I believe the world can be better. Let me actually meet with you at an emotional level. You know, if there's flowers, all these wonderful things are happening. Please, right? We don't have to be Neanderthals. But then they couldn't respond correctly to that. And I think, now that I think about it, and I've thought about it a little bit before, they were uncomfortable by that response because they weren't used to that response. People still sort of prefer on a shallow level to meet a man who is violent in his reactions. Like, no, I'm not doing that, right? Because that's what they're used to. It doesn't necessarily mean that's what they even enjoy or that's what they like, but it's almost like that's accepted. But then if you go vulnerable, which was my experience, they don't really say, oh, here's a man who's vulnerable, let's recognize that. They just go, yeah, it looks like you're talking too much, essentially, right? And then you go, okay, so next time that this happens, I won't even acknowledge you. Like, we're not even going to have a conversation. I'll just say no, because that's what the man is, right? And that's what you want to hear. It's not what they want to really hear. It's not what I want to say. So both parties are lying, right? But such as it is, this is where we are.
So in today's episode, we do have Kaya. Welcome. We've
you.
had a great relationship with Kaya for a long time. And congratulations on winning Podcast of the Year.
Thank you.
So just was one of the main reasons we would love to have you on this to talk about, I feel like you've touched on this topic multiple times on your podcast platform.
Mm-hmm.
And so with this one, we want to talk about men's mental health, but from the perspective of a woman who's on the receiving end of this. So we've sat down with a bunch of different people, and there's a common theme when you ask men about being vulnerable. There's always a hesitation or a point in time in which they did try to be vulnerable to either their partner or to the opposite gender, and it was never met with the never met the right way, or never received it the right way, and that kind of like has made them to come up with a final decision to never ever do that again. So you hear a lot of men say that I'll never open up to my partner again or the opposite gender again, simply because it was never met well when I did that. So I was wondering if you ever had a story in which, like a personal story that basically highlights what I've just talked about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think men's mental health is interesting. I feel like now I've been put in positions to understand and learn more about it with like various men in my life, young and old. Like, I'm learning about it now from like my little nephews and just kind of seeing how they're developing, and then also from like other men around me that are already developed, and kind of just like observing and seeing how it's manifesting in them now. But to your question of like men's vulnerability, because I think at a certain point I used to be like one of those people that was very ignorant and just be like, men just need to be vulnerable. They just need to like talk more. They just need to share, until you actually get to speak with men. And I feel like almost every guy has pulled back from that place has that story of, I used to be that way. And what I've noticed is that a lot of the time it was usually, from the stories that I've heard at least, it was usually an encounter that they had with other men. Right. So like one person told me that like he used to be, the nice guy. He used to be like very welcoming and trying to make a lot of friends. Like when he would go to school and this, that, like he used to be on the basketball team, and like he would try to, be buddies with everybody. But then either because of like size or his personality, that was taken advantage of. And so in his mind, like that was him being open, being vulnerable, and being himself. Like that's who he is in his nature. But because of that not being received well, he realized that, hey, like this is a group of people that I respect and I want to fit in here. So what do I have to do to fit in? And so now you're seeing how these other men who might not understand, or maybe they just don't have the personality, the character that is like him, that is, outgoing, friendly, just cool, cool, nice guy. They might be, more hard. They might be more aggressive in whatever sense. And so now a lot of guys that I've like met have taken on that personality and that persona of, being the aggressor, being like the cool guy, not really, doing as much, not showing your emotions as much, not showing that you care. And then like when they actually now get into spaces where people might, in relationships maybe, where a partner might welcome that, they're kind of confused, and they're just like, but I shut that part down of myself. So now I don't even know how to bring it up. Like it's foreign. There's kind of like a disconnect there because it's like, I know it's there, but then I'm afraid to bring it out and I don't really know how to bring it out. Because what if I bring this and you don't like, they're trying to think of like which part do I pull out. So yeah, it's pretty interesting to see with men. And I feel like as a woman, I'm put on the hard end because I can't necessarily say, oh, just do this and just do this, just do that. Because I was not there when you had to shut down, right? And I was not there when all those events happened that changed you. So I think it's really important for other men to have those conversations and to kind of gain understanding from each other of where they can, where things went wrong and where they can kind of fix those things. So,
So thank you guys for joining us again. So in this same episode, we had Yemi. So we bringing in Zainab to basically how the show runs. We get a therapist to review the show we had with the interviews with Yemi. In this case, we discussed about vulnerability, and a lot of men seem to echo these same sentiments. And what this sentiment is that at some point that they have tried to be vulnerable, but it seems that society does not respond back with the right response. And then due to that, they decide to close off. And you hear a lot of men say, I would never ever open up or be vulnerable, or they begin to tweak their behaviors to basically match what they get feedback they're getting back from society. So Zainab, if you have anything to share about Yemi, who just talked about him interacting with his family and being vulnerable with his family and their reaction. I was wondering if you have something to share on this particular topic.
Yeah, absolutely. So there were a couple of themes that I noticed, just kind of watching and listening to his experience. Right away, just a very excellent articulation of how difficult it is for men to be vulnerable in today's society, and in a society where now we're even much more aware, and the need for mental health support is much more pronounced, especially coming out of a pandemic. I think that in this situation for Yemi, what I really saw as one of the biggest themes was the socialization of young boys. I think that that's something that we never talk about in the mental health community, or even in just the community in general when it comes to like the with Black culture and the Black community. How much do we focus on boys or men? I think men's mental health is kind of taking a little bit more of an upkick in recent times, but for boys, I think that that's a place that's heavily neglected. I mean, when we talk about the needs of boys, we really are looking at mentorship and things like that, but we really don't see a huge focus on the emotional health of boys. And so when we look at how boys were socialized, I'm sure you both can attest to this, being men as well. What do we know happens for children when they grow up, and what do they observe, right? People say that, kids are like sponges, and you say, do as I say, not do as I do. Yeah. They're going to do, what they see you do, and they're going to copy the sex that they closely identify with. So, if a young boy is growing up and he sees that how his dad deals with stress is to yell or be like super quiet and into himself, or to drink, for example, those may be some of the traits that they pick up as ways to manage their emotions. And so, Yemi talked about a range of emotions when it comes to men not being, visible. And that's actually quite true because, for women, we know, what does it look like to be sad, or to be excited, or to be confused, or to have complex or complicated emotions, what does it look like to go through a divorce or whatever. But a lot of those things aren't shown to men, right? With women, we have the power of community. And I think that Yemi really mentioned that in his narration of his kind of conversation or love letter to his family, where he was kind of met with an okay. And I think that we have to do better with our response to men. Typically, when we look at some statistics around mental health for men, there's a arm of the NHS in the UK, which is their AHS. Essentially called the Priori, and they did the study on men. I think it was like 1,000 men they surveyed, and they found that 77% of men polled have suffered some common mental health issue like anxiety, stress, depression, and that is because of a lack of vocalization when it comes to their emotions and being comfortable enough to be vulnerable. One of the other things was that like 40% of men have never spoken to anyone about their mental health before, and that's a massive number. That's like
Wow.
really huge, right? Like not spoken to anyone, not a professional. I mean, just anyone in general.
Wow.
Right. So yeah. So when you think about that and you're thinking, okay, there's a lot of men who are silenced. I remember I was talking to my dad and he had mentioned once about, kind of how men think. And he had made this analogy of like a cave, and that, sometimes, kind of going to the dating world, you meet certain guys and you're kind of wondering, okay, like I talk to girls and they are like normal and they will say like, oh, I feel this way. And you just see like silence, but something, you perceive that something's wrong. And, you have a conversation. Hey, what's going on? It's like, I'm good, but you can see like the wheels turning in there. And so this analogy just describes that like, men will recuse themselves from their relationships or like from, their connections, and they'll just enter into a very silent place in their minds whenever there's a problem, and they stay there until the problem is solved. So for example, you say to your brother, hey, I have this issue, like, or whatever, or like I feel suicidal, for example. He has to deal with the emotion, the residual emotions that come from that. But now he doesn't know what to do with it. He doesn't know how to solve it. And so you have a lot of men who are just like shackled by these emotions they don't know how to deal with or solve. And then when they try to express them, then they're met with isolation, being ostracized, being shamed, right? And that pushes them further into that proverbial cave. So those are some of my thoughts on Yemi's, kind of recollection of that story, which really stood out to me and is very typical when it comes to the male experience in the mental health realm. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you. I think that wraps it up for Yemi. That gives us a lot of insight as to, honestly, that's a lot of us men, that's kind of like how we approach our mental health, to be very honest. And his story is very similar. Like I related to that. Like Leruo was listening to, like, that makes perfect sense to me. So thank you so much for basically tying that up and putting it on the bowl for in regards to the conversation with Yemi. Thank you so much for joining us today. Perfect.